Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcast. You're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Ampire Media, Ampire. Always much appreciated when you tune in. Don't forget, you can read my work on ESPN.com. I have several stories up now, all sorts of things happening, which is why you see my pal Nicki Jhabvala from the Washington Post here, if you're watching on YouTube. And just want to talk about today's news. Jack Del Rio, Brent Vieselmeyer, both out. Nicki, any surprise?
Not terribly. I mean, I felt like we were kind of going back and forth. Will they? Should they? Would they? That type of deal. But I mean, these last two games are just they were disasters. You can't lose to the Giants the way that you did, and you can't have that game even against a good Cowboys team. The way it ended there in the fourth quarter is just you can't have these things happening. And this is a group, this defense that I don't want to speak for everybody, but I certainly thought, would be not only good, but improved from last season. And it's been anything but. So can you hear my dog growling in the background? He's really upset about all of this. Apparently.
Yeah. Well, if he had to watch that game yesterday, I don't blame him. So, you and I get paid to watch that game. He doesn't. So, but exactly. It is obviously things haven't been going well. I think that to me has been the biggest surprise of this season is how poorly they have done and from start to finish. And it's not, they were playing poorly before they traded Montez Sweat and Chase Young, and they played poorly after. And it usually goes back to the secondary in particular, which is where Brent Vieselmeyer was in charge of. Did you kind of feel like, is this too little too late or at this point in the season?
I don't know if it's too little too late, because even if they had done it earlier in the season, I don't know what sort of effect. I still don't know what sort of effect it'll have. I think part of that is just the way this staff is structured. There's, Ron Rivera is going to be calling the defensive plays, and I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing. The last time he did it was in 2019. And there's really nobody else on staff who's experienced. The only other person is Juan Castillo, and he's a run game coordinator, and he had a year of it, and it did not go well in Philadelphia. So, there's not so many options, but I feel like they're kind of at the point where you have to make a change for the sake of making a change, because you can't just go on like this.
Right.
They got 5 games left. There's playoffs have, that's
we
not
can play
even
the Jim Morris stuff right now for that one, but yes, but
now they have a tough. It's not like they make the change and okay, let's see how it goes. You got the Miami Dolphins coming in, good luck.
I was talking to someone in baseball, they always say call the players only meeting before you play like a really bad team, right? Because then it can look like, oh, you had this meeting and they went out and won this series. This is you're going to make this change no, that's a brutal one to do, and you're right. The other thing I wonder too, because as you said, Ron Rivera has not called plays since then, and he did not really want to do it in Carolina.
Yeah.
And I think he prefers to be that CEO, hire someone that you trust. I also wonder, because we know the whole cancer battle, and he's probably at a better point where he can handle that now than he would have been certainly a year ago. So, but it's still a lot. And when you haven't done it, it's a lot. And I know he's a defensive minded head coach, but still it's a lot to put on your plate at a time where you're trying to kind of right the ship a little bit. But, he said, Ron Rivera told us today, he wanted to do some things differently. Mm-hmm. He didn't really explain, but how did you take that?
I took that to mean, some scheme and positional things. Maybe a little less man coverage was being more.
Why would they do that?
Yeah, why would they do that?
Man
that
against Tyreek Hill would be
one. Good. Yeah. Maybe put some players in different positions in light of those changes, because what they're doing on the field is not working, clearly. That's kind of how I took it. I could see how it was perceived initially as, were there disagreements on how they thought the defense should be called, blah, blah, blah. And maybe there were at some point, but, they ran different defenses in their separate stints as head coaches. So I think it's natural for Ron to want to kind of change things and go with what he's comfortable with.
And he did say that he was in alliance with Del Rio with how things were going. And listen, you can only change so much at this point in the
Right.
year. You can't
Right.
change the scheme. You can't do this overhaul. So it's really about how you see the game needing to be called.
Right. And to
And
me, that's maximizing your personnel. That's
right.
not
Yes,
scheme. It's making
exactly.
sure the players are in the right position.
Exactly. And I think the fact that with Vieselmeyer too, that it suggests, I mean, clearly there was issues in the secondary. And
Yeah.
you would hear from guys like, the teaching isn't as what they want, blah, blah, blah. And so I think that manifests itself into a lot of these coverage issues.
Right.
But I also don't want to absolve the players of the blame, because there's sometimes like, well, you're being taught to play it this way. Why aren't you?
Right.
So, I guess sticking there, how much do you think they missed Chris Harris because they let him go to Tennessee after the season? How big an issue do you think that is?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to put too much stock into that. I mean, he was a decent assistant, but it's not like he got hired as a defensive coordinator
Right.
anywhere. So I don't, I know guys respected him, but he wasn't like, the greatest secondary coach that has come through the doors or anything. He's a good coach. I don't want to take away from
Right.
anything he did, but I don't know that you could point to that necessarily. I think to me, it all comes back to the broader issues, and it's not one coach or one player per se. It's getting the right guys, finding the personnel that fits your scheme and tailoring the scheme to your personnel, developing those players, and putting them in position on game days. I mean, it sounds cliche, but that's what it comes down to. And executing, like you said, the players have to do their part too. And there have been moments where they have been put in good calls and they just haven't executed.
Right.
And I thought where Ron was very fair and accurate was when he said we're all culpable. This comes down
that's
to
definitely
everybody.
true.
I mean, these are the two that got fired, but they're not solely responsible for, the debacle of much of the season.
Right. No, and I agree. And the part with Harris where you noticed him more was on when we would watch him in training camp, he was very, you knew where Chris Harris was at all times.
Sure.
And the part that I liked, that I wondered about, was the communication among the players and how, he'd stand behind the defense and he's shouting out like, what are you seeing? What is a call? What are you seeing? Relay this, relay that. And so you really work on that. But it's also, I think you need somebody like that on the field as well. Somebody who's a strong personality on the field who can do that as well. And so I think that's another area where for this team look to upgrade next year, or at least add somebody like that. So I don't think it's as simple as to say like, well, he wasn't here, they went in the toilet. I think there's other, you had Percy Butler's a young guy and he's thrust into a bigger role. And I think like you said, the man coverage was saying juiced. It's not working. So, Emmanuel Forbes hasn't panned out yet. And, Quan Martin is slowly integrating into a more of a role. But so there's a lot of issues to me that it kind of really highlights with this. And, with Del Rio,
mm-hmm.
Do you think, so I'll just say this, like you hear like guys liked him, but I think after a while you realize not a whole lot's changing here. They kind of, this is what Jack ran, this is what you're going to do, and you're just going to stick to that. And, is that kind of your sense?
Yeah. And I think we could see it on the field, especially recently. They've been sticking to their scheme. And this is kind of what I go back to with, if you're going to say you're going to tailor your scheme to your players and actually do it. And if not, get the right personnel to fit that scheme. And I don't think they did either of those. But yeah, I think it's very rigid, I would say. And it's, you see it. I notice it mostly up front, especially now since they traded away Montez Sweat and Chase Young, that they don't run any of the things they used to run. I get it. The players are different, but you got to have some creativity up front, or else
there was none.
You're just always telling the opponents what you're going to do. Basically, it's so predictable.
It was 4 guys rush, try and win your one-on-one, you win a double team. And that was a lot of what was going on. And that's why, when you watch Dallas be leading into this game and then watching them yesterday, I like watching how they use the guys up front, because you have this phenomenal pass rusher, Micah Parsons, but you're doing everything you can to make sure he has a good matchup every time, it seems.
Right.
And if not, then someone else is playing off that, and you're running a lot of games and stunts, and there's a lot of, like, you'd see this line, as we know what the line struggles have been, but there are a lot of, at best, mediocre or bad lines in this league. Well, a lot. There's certainly enough of them. So test the group, right? Test them.
Right.
See how they respond to, stunts and games like that. The only problem, though, is to do that, you need the secondary to hold up in coverage.
Right. I mean, and that's been a disaster, really. I mean, there's been penalties, total blown coverages. I mean, short passes that turn into 25, 30-yard gains because of missed tackles. I mean, guys taking wrong angles, help not being where it needs to be. I mean, it's just, and that's where you wonder, are they getting the teaching they need? Are they not putting in the work? Is it both?
Right.
Like, because something's amiss here, clearly.
And it's funny because when you hear these guys, like, I think they feel like they always feel like they put in the work. But this group, with the way they did training camp this year, I think they've been worked harder than they had been. And when you don't see the results, there's always going to be, on both sides of the ball, if you don't see results, no matter who you are, whatever team you're on, whoever's coaching, you don't see the results, you're going to be frustrated.
Right.
And I think, when you're not seeing the results, and then people like us are coming in there saying, why are you guys playing so poorly? You start to, you look at everything, and maybe it's this, maybe it's that. And the hardest thing to do is to look at yourself sometimes, and be honest with yourself about that. But, it just, do you think it's probably hard? I think it's hard to answer this one about Rivera's job security going forward. But this was the one move where you felt like they for sure might make. And I don't know that he'll go before the season or not. And it's hard to really speculate on that at this point, because
I mean, I got the sense from Josh Harris's statement that, he'll stay for the remainder of the season. Correct. I mean, he's got to call the plays. I mean, you're kind of at the bottom of the barrel with their staff right now. There's like, I don't mean that offensively to Ron. It's more like they're stretched thin as it is. So it's like, and you take away more, it's just going to make it even harder on the players.
And that's a good point that, now, but I took the statement too. It's like, okay, use the year to, again, this is what we've heard all along, use the year to evaluate, and then go from there. So, I think I'm with you on that.
I mean, I'm still at the point, and a lot could change. We'll see how things go in the off season, but I'm still at the point where this is going to be an off season of significant change in business and football. And at this point, I would expect a brand new coaching staff.
Yeah. And they're certainly where they're trending. I mean, barring some big time turnaround, and then it becomes all about Sam and how does his development, and, and what do you do if he's developing in a certain way and you want a different voice? Does Bieniemy get who knows? There's a lot to answer, because we don't know who's going to be making those decisions outside of Harris.
There's still a month and a half for the season, 2 months for the season. Then you got playoffs and who's going to be available. And there's a lot. There's a lot. That's, you kind of depressed. Did I just get you depressed?
How much time? Like, oh man. But it is a lot. And this was the first big move. And, I don't know. The last thing is, then when you look at the secondary, do you see chances for that? Because I think that's going to be a big group. Rivera can call a more creative, aggressive game because the plays are in the playbook. I mean, they're all in there.
Yeah.
But I don't know, Nicki. I don't know that this is going to have this huge effect. And I don't know that Rivera knows that either. I think it's just like you kind of felt like after these snowballs, and it's another national game, you have to do something.
Yeah, I felt like it was just that. You hope it's a spark for the sake of having a spark. How it, is it real, or is it more like, a change just kind of incites something new and that gets guys going. But I just feel like there's only so much you could do. I feel like you're kind of limping toward the end of the season here. You just would like to not get embarrassed again, but they got a tough stretch coming up. It's not going to be easy. And then if they were in playoff contention and made this move, I think there'd obviously be a lot more to talk about and a lot more to consider, but they're out of it. Like it's,
In fairness, if they win,
pretty much.
In fairness, if they win 5 in a row, they can still make it.
Yeah.
So,
Hate to be the pessimist here, but
yes.
yeah, but that's kind of that's how it's been for the last few weeks too, is like, oh my God, how are we going to get through these next 8 weeks, 7 weeks, 6 weeks? But
it becomes so much about how, and then because it will be interesting if you start playing some more young guys, and although like they are playing young guys, but I am curious to see what the changes are just from a going forward standpoint, because part of what I want to see, I'm sure what they want to see, is how do these guys factor into the future? So like, is it the coaching? Is it them? Do you now have to go? Because that's what a big part of the evaluation is, not just on the coaches, it's on everybody. Right. So you want to maximize their ability to do something so you have a clearer picture going forward of what you really need.
And they need these young guys to really be serviceable, at least, I mean, the ones that worry me are the players like Benjamin St-Juste and Percy Butler, who have been, for better or worse, staples of the secondary this year. You need them to perform well. They're key players, and they're on rookie deals. They're big parts of this defense, but at times it feels like they've been regressing. Like you said, is that on them? Is that on the coaching staff? Can they get back on track? That's incredibly important, because, everybody points out, oh, they have so much cap room. That money goes fast.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, especially with the positions they're going to need in the offseason. And it's a long list already. I mean, this is a team that, and I meant fault for this too. I thought they were deeper on paper than they clearly are. But now going into this offseason, I just see a really long to-do list.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that out, because I do kind of blame you for some of that as well. So,
you're right.
But it is, I think we all thought, like, I didn't think they're going to be this great team, but I thought they were an 8 or 9 win team. Right. And I think where most of us were in that same thought process based on last year. And you have, well, if the offense improves and the defense is at least close to what they were. But I also wonder too, then, you're not, whoever comes in is going to have to look at this, and with Josh Harris that he's going to be patient. Say, like, you can't solve this all in one offseason. So do what you can, maximize the value of what you have, but keep building for next offseason. But we'll get into that later on down the road. So Nicki, tell people where they can find you.
At WashingtonPost.com/sports, and on Twitter at Nicki, Nicki Jhabvala, Jhabvala.
There you go. Give her a follow as always, and give her a read. As always, thanks for coming on, Nicki. Always great insight. So, and thanks for everybody for listening. I'll be back sometime next week, probably Monday. I don't know. It's a lot going on, Nicki. I'm tired. So anyways, I'll talk to you next time.
All right. See ya.